Okay, so it's time for us to continue our coverage over the X-Men. Now, with that being said, we're going to cover the adventures of Cyclops and the Phoenix. Now, this storyline is very crucial for two different reasons. The first is that, okay, as we all know, Cyclops and Jean Grey got married not too long ago in our coverage, and so they left the team to go on their honeymoon. This storyline is basically their honeymoon, so honestly, it's pretty messed up, but also it's us continuing our coverage over the origin of Cable. And let me explain. You see, when it came to Marvel Comics in the 1990s, their main goal was to give us the origin of Cable, which honestly, a lot of fans back then wanted to know the full origin of Cable. But for Marvel, they had to make things a tad bit, well, difficult. You see, they gave us different stories that were technically used as a way to flesh out the origin of Cable. But here comes the big problem with that. You see, those stories came out in different years in different orders. So, for example, this storyline came out in 1994, but this is technically the second storyline you need to read in a certain order when it comes to the origin of Cable. The first one was X-Men Phoenix 99, which was in our last video. That's the first story you need to read when it comes to the origin of Cable. And then there are two more after this one, and then you finally get the full idea of the origin of Cable. And so, as I said, there are two different reasons why we have to cover the storyline before we are able to dive into the Phalanx Covenant storyline. But like I said, this takes place right after you have Cyclops and Jean Grey get married and go on their honeymoon. Because with the two on their honeymoon, out of nowhere, they're then pulled into the far, far future. Now, when I say they're pulled into the far future, I'm not saying like their body, their mind, their souls. It's just only their mind and souls have been pulled into the far future, and their souls and minds have been placed in new bodies in this far future they had arrived in. And so we pick up with Jean Grey kind of realizing that she has no idea what in the world is going on, but at the same time, she realized that she's in a different body, a body that does not belong to her at all. Now, around her, all she sees is a bunch of dead bodies and some kind of building that has gone through some kind of war, it seems. Now, while you have Jean Grey in this body, she's also looking for Scott Summers. And of course, she does find Scott, but she also realized that Scott is no longer in his body either. And right now, her main goal is to figure out what in the world is going on here. And so this begins the process of us learning what's going on right now for our heroes. You see, yes, they were teleported into the future, but they were taken to a future where Apocalypse is the ruler of the future. If you saw my last video, the same thing kind of happened to Rachel Summers. When she had arrived 2,000 years in the future, she arrived in a time where Apocalypse was the ruler of the world. Again, the storyline does take place after that one, but you have Cyclops and Jean Grey realize that they no longer have their abilities. And so they're kind of freaking out because you do have some soldiers of Apocalypse forces walk into the building and they find Cyclops and Jean Grey. Now, they do call them Flaskans because right now they believe that Cyclops and Jean Grey are regular humans. And technically, they are. But it does seem like our heroes are about to die by the hands of the forces of Apocalypse. But luckily for our heroes, they are then saved by the Mother Ascani. Now, we have seen the Mother Ascani in a few videos when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. Now, we had learned a while back that the Mother Ascani is Rachel Summers, but we had no idea how in the world did she end up becoming the Mother Ascani. And so in our last video, we had learned that once she had left the Excalibur book, issue number 75, she was teleported into the far future, again, 2,000 years into the future, and that began her adventure of building up the Ascani clan, but also becoming the Mother Ascani. But either way, at this point in time, she's really old, and her main goal is to protect Cyclops and Jean Grey, and she knows it's them two right now in these two bodies that's not technically theirs. Now, at first, you have Rachel Summers being able to hold her own until She runs into Chivalry, and I really hope I pronounced that name correctly. Now, for Chivalry, we actually saw him back in the X-Men Phoenix 99 storyline. In that storyline, he was trying his best to rise up in the ranks. And by this point in the timeline, he has. He's really more Apocalypse right-hand man. But right now, his main goal is to kill off Rachel Summers. Now, again, by this point, she's old, and so unfortunately, she's not as powerful as she used to be. But on top of that, she no longer has the powers of the Phoenix. At the end of our last video, she let that power go. And so technically right now, she's struggling at the moment. But then at the very last second, you have Cyclops and Jean Grey being able to get rid of Chivalry temporarily, but also getting hold of Rachel and finding an escape route to get the heck out of there before he's able to kill them. Now, before we kind of jump forward in the storyline, I do want to point out that you have Chivalry scan both Cyclops and Jean Grey, and in his mind right now, they're flat scans. They're basic human beings. And for him, he's very confused on the fact that why would regular humans go out of their way to help out a mutant? Because in the far future, mutants are now first class and humans are now second class. But either way, you have Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Rachel being able to, well, get away. And so once our heroes have some downtime, you then have Rachel Summers begin the process of trying to catch everyone up with what's happening right now in the far future where Apocalypse rules. Now, we have to jump back to some earlier storylines that we had covered. Here's the reason why. Because for Jean Grey, once she realized that it's Rachel Summers, her daughter from a different timeline, is currently talking to her, she's kind of like, how in the world did you end up here? The last time I saw you, you were at our wedding. And you had Rachel say, yeah, I was there. But then we had something else happen to me. And so now we got to jump back over to Excalibur 75. Here's the reason why. Because in that storyline, we had learned that Captain Britain was lost in time. Now, with him being lost in time, it seemed like the only way to bring him back into the main Marvel Universe was to use Rachel Summers. Because it seemed like back then that the only reason why she was the key, because she was the only person who was technically out of time. She was not from the main Marvel Universe. It was time trying to fix itself. And so you did have Rachel go ahead and give up her life as a way to bring over Captain Britain. Except when she did that, she did not go back to her timeline. She went into the far, far future. And that led into X-Men Phoenix 99. And so once again in that storyline, you had Rachel Summers over time become the mother of Ascanis. Now, here comes the big catch. You see, for Rachel Summers, she realized that the only way to stop Apocalypse was to use Cable. And so she had to bring young Nathan into the future. This leads into X Factor issue number 68 and 69, better known as X Factor Endgame. Now, in that storyline, you had Apocalypse give young Cable the techno-organic virus. With that virus, it was slowly killing off baby Nathan. But out of nowhere, you didn't have this member of the Ascani clan appear to take young Cable into the future to save his life. And this leads us back into this storyline. Now, with all that being said, for Rachel Summers, she knew that if she was more healthy, but also was young Cable, they could easily take down Apocalypse in this time period. But the problem is right now, she's old and young Nathan is not healthy because again, he's also fighting the techno-organic virus. And this is where Cyclops and Jean Grey comes in. Because for Rachel Summers, what she wants them to do now is to be the ones to raise young Nathan into the man that he is supposed to be. The man that brings down Apocalypse, but also becomes Cable in the past as well. But here is the big catch. They will not tell young Cable that it's them, Cyclops and Jean Grey, from the past into the future because, well, timeline stuff. But you also have Rachel Summers being able to give them their abilities so that they're able to now protect themselves, but to also protect young Nathan. Everything is coming back together. But you didn't have Rachel pass out. Now, she's on the verge of death, but she ain't dead just yet. Now, all of this is a lot for both characters, but I kind of want to focus more on Jean Grey. Here's the reason why. Because for Jean Grey, her and Rachel Summers were finally able to kind of get along with one another. For a good while there, for Jean Grey, once she had found out that Rachel Summers was her daughter from a different timeline, Jean Grey wanted nothing from Rachel at all. It scared her because it kind of told her her whole life has been planned out for her. No matter what, she'll be married to Cyclops and have a daughter with Rachel Summers. She hated the idea that she no longer had that free will that she always loved. Now, over time, she began to realize that she overreacted, but that was only a week ago, right after the wedding, really before the wedding of Cyclops and Jean Grey. And so she hates the idea of now seeing Rachel basically dying in front of her. Now, you do have the two characters try to walk around the area, but you didn't have Chivalry call out for them. And the reason why, because and we see that for Chivalry, he's holding on to baby Nathan. Now, for Cyclops, this is a huge moment because he's now seeing his son all over again, who's still being affected by the techno-organic virus. Now, for Cyclops, the last time he saw his son was back in X Factor Endgame. Oh, yeah, real quick. Something else I should mention is that Jean Grey is not the son of Cable. Actually, it is Madeline Pryor, the clone of Jean Grey. Now, I'm not going to sit down and try to explain the whole path between Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Madeline Pryor. There were a lot of red flags that you had Cyclops doing. They do have some major toxic issues. Either way, when it comes to Cyclops and also Jean Grey, they realize they got to save young Nathan. So they do go out of their way to get young Nathan and get him away from Chivalry. Now, for Chivalry, he's not happy about the idea that he lost both Cyclops and Jean Grey, but also the baby. But at least for our heroes, they were able to save the baby, but also Rachel Summers as well. Rachel Summers, had a hard time saying that. So as we dive into the second chapter of the storyline, we do pick up 5 years later. Now, when we do, we pick up with Cyclops and Jean Grey going by a different name, and that would be Slim and Red. Daysprings, by the way. And the reason why, because thanks to the Ascani, they were able to give our heroes some documentation to kind of prove that they're from this time period, but it also covered their tracks as well. And so we kind of see Cyclops and Jean Grey just going towards a new city called Coast Crest. Now, here's the thing. In the last 5 years, you had our two heroes just travel town to town as a way to make sure they stay hidden from Apocalypse, to make sure to get young Cable to that point where possibly he'll be able to take down Apocalypse. Now, while they are traveling, you do have Cyclops get off his horse, but while doing that, he kind of fell to his knee. His body is not what his old body used to be. And so when he gets down, he begins to speak Old English. Now, that is very important for this chapter. And the reason why, because you have another traveler walking by and being very confused about the idea of why Cyclops, or Slim, was using Old English. Now, for Cyclops, he was able to play it off, but the guy's kind of like, there's something about you that makes no sense to me right now at the moment. But now we have to jump over to Chivalry, who's currently at some social event. Now, we're going to use this event as a way to reintroduce a character we have not seen in a while when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men, and that would be Strife. Now, real quickly, when it comes to Strife, we had learned that he was the clone of Cable. Here is the whole full idea of Strife's origin. So, when it comes to young Cable, when he had received the techno-organic virus, he was pulled into the future. Except when he arrived in the future, they realized that he had the techno-organic virus. And so they made a clone of young Cable. And they were kind of hoping to use young Cable's clone as a way to fight against Apocalypse. Apocalypse. The problem was the forces of Apocalypse had arrived at the base of the Ascani, and you had those forces being able to grab one of the two babies. And of course, that was Strife, while you had the Ascani hold on to young Cable. And so right now for Apocalypse, he believes that he has the original baby. He has young Nathan, not the clone. And so now for young Strife here, he had been raised by Apocalypse be the next in line for Apocalypse Empire. Now, in reality, it's really more of Apocalypse trying to raise young Strife to get him ready to use his body as a host so that he'll then be able to continue on as the ruler of his empire. And that kind of ties into what's happening with Apocalypse at the moment, because right now for Apocalypse, he's trying to find a new host. But the problem is every single time he gets a new host, it dies off faster than the previous one did. It's him hoping that possibly Strife will be a long-term solution for his host problem. But now we can jump back over to Cyclops, Jean Grey, and also Nathan. And they do arrive at Coast Crest. Now, when they arrive, they have everything they need that should give them access to the city. But the guards are complete jerks to the point where they say, hey, we cannot allow you to go inside at all. And the reason why, because we believe that you guys could be enemies of Apocalypse. Now, for most people out there, when they look at Cyclops and Jean Grey, they're just regular Flaskans, regular humans, not knowing that they have powers. But at the same time, though, they still have all the papers to kind of prove that, hey, we're okay. Let us in the city. Now, that old guy, not the old guy, he's kind of young actually, but the guy we saw earlier that heard Cyclops speak Old English reappears and says, hey, listen, they have to be enemies of Apocalypse. I heard that one right there speak Old English, which honestly, no one does that anymore. And so just like that, they are ready to kill off Cyclops and Jean Grey. Now for Scott, he was trying to speak his way out of this situation, but unfortunately, he can't. But luckily for our heroes, they get saved at the very last second by Prior Turin. Now, Prior Turin is part of a new rebellion that came after you had Apocalypse being able to get rid of the Ascani, and they are called Clan Rebellion. Now, this new clan, he's one of their leaders in that clan. But of course, when he does arrive, you have everyone stop because they heard stories about this guy. Now, most of the stories they heard, they heard that he had died. But right now, they have living proof that one, he's not dead, but two, he is somebody you don't want to mess with. And so with him being there, he was able to get Cyclops, Jean Grey, and also young Nathan into the city, but have the guards back off as well and turn their attention to that traveler we saw earlier. Now, once you have our heroes being able to get inside the city, and so as we close on the second chapter, and you have our heroes now being able to get into the city, they see how broken the city is. You have so many different people, mostly humans, just barely surviving. And so this begins the whole process of Cyclops and Jean Grey, and hopefully Nathan as well, wanting to change the world for the betterment. And really, you have Prior Turin saying like, yeah, that we need right now to save the entire planet. Not just the humans, but humans, mutants, other races that are currently on Earth at the moment. Now, as we get into the third issue, 3 more years have passed by. So now 8 years since Scott and Jean Grey have been in this reality raising young Cable. Now, when it comes to young Cable, it's now Jean Grey being the one to teach him how to use his psychic abilities. And honestly, I kind of like this because you have the book go ahead and say, let's not forget that she had learned from Charles Xavier many years ago. And look, time has changed where now she's no longer the student, she's now the teacher. It's up to her to teach him how to use his abilities as a way to hide his cybernetic arm. Now, for young Cable, he wants to know what he truly is. Like, who is he officially? And why does he have to hide from Apocalypse? Now, for Jean Grey, she has all the answers because she knows the older version of Nathan, because in the past, He's Cable. He's the leader of X-Force. They have fought alongside with one another. But this is young Cable, and she can't go out of her way to tell him everything that she knows. And so instead, she has to kind of give him just small details about what's to come for him down the road when it comes to his life and also his connection to Apocalypse. Now, I kind of want to jump back over to Chivalry, and the reason why, because for Chivalry, he's trying to express his concerns to Apocalypse, but the whole idea of robbing the childhood of Strife. Now, for Apocalypse, he's kind of wondering, why in the world should he care about the childhood of Strife? Because to him, the child is only going to be used as a vessel when the child is ready for that role. But for Apocalypse, he's saying, dude, listen, I gave that child the techno-organic virus back in the past to see if that child would be able to become a great vessel for me to use. And this kind of shows that Apocalypse still believes that he has the original baby. He has no idea that currently he has the clone baby. Now, again, for Apocalypse, he wanted to use Cable as a vessel, except when it came to him giving young Cable the techno-organic virus, he saw the Ascani take the child away into the future, and he thought he lost the child forever until he had learned about the Ascani, until he had learned about the mother Ascani, and also young Cable now being in this time period. And so again, he still believes that he has young Cable, but in reality, the dude has Strife. But as we get back over to Cyclops and also Jean Grey, we do see that Cyclops is deep into the clan rebellion as a way to help them fight against the forces of Apocalypse. Now, you have them getting ready for a raid, but before they're able to go on that raid, you have Jean Grey pull Cyclops to the side to have a conversation. And we kind of get the idea that even though Cyclops loves the idea of raising his son, he has been unfortunately spending a lot of time with the rebellion and not with young Nathan. And right now, Nathan needs a father in his corner. Now, for Cyclops, he realized that he had messed up because to him, he was technically an orphanage for a good while in his life until you had Charles Xavier step in to help take care of him and raise him. And so for Scott, he kind of realized what Cable is going through because for young Nathan, he still believes that Cyclops and Jean Grey, better known as Slim and Red, are not really his actual parents, even though technically they are. But either way, we do learn that for Cyclops, he will have a talk with Nathan when he comes back from the latest raid they have to go on. Then this leads into the rebellion, Scott Summers, and also Jean Grey arriving at some kind of facility that belongs to the forces of Apocalypse. Now, this is another callback to another storyline that we had did in the past, and that would be the Executioner Song storyline. Now, that was very important for the world of X-Men comics. And let me explain why, because at the end of that storyline, you had Strife release some kind of virus out into the world, better known as the Legacy virus. And that virus is killing off mutants left and right. Matter of fact, you already had two characters on two different X teams die by this point in our coverage over the X-Men. Kuwanen and also Jamie Maddox. Now, with all that being said, when you have our heroes arrive, Scott Summers, Jean Grey, and the Rebellion, they see this sample. When they all look at the sample, they realize it's some kind of virus. This is the origin of the Legacy virus, because you have Scott and Jean Grey realize what they are looking at, which means Apocalypse was the one who had created the virus, but it was Strife who took the virus back in time and released the virus out into the world. But while you have our heroes in the rebellion kind of looking at this structure of the Legacy virus, they're then confronted by the forces of Apocalypse. Now, here's the thing. The forces are being led by both Chivalry and also Strife. But for Chivalry, his main goal is to bring down the rebellion, but he wants to go ahead and capture them alive. But for Strife, with him being so dark now, thanks to being raised by Apocalypse, he's more of like, nah, let's go ahead and kill everyone here. And so you kind of find out the rebellion, they were set up. You see, one of their own made them believe they had somebody on their side who had all the intel of all the different facilities owning to Apocalypse. But in reality, that person was working for Apocalypse the entire time. But either way, you do have our heroes trying their best to survive. Now, for Nathan, he's there as well. And this is the moment where you have young Nathan find out that Cyclops and Jean Grey are technically part of the rebellion. Now, for Nathan here, he's trying to figure out how can he help out the rebellion. But then out of nowhere, he's then contacted by somebody, a female somebody, who's now able to talk to him and guide him to help out the others in this situation by going over to a computer. Now, we have no idea at the moment who is talking to him, but we'll learn here in the next chapter. But for young Nathan, you have him be confronted by Strife. Now, this is the first time you have these two characters meeting up with one another. And honestly, they're kind of freaking out because they want to know how in the world they are able to read each other's mind, but also why they look alike. Now, for young Strife here, he begins the process of trying to rip apart Cable because with the techno-organic virus being in the body of young Nathan, well, most of his body was turned into techno-organic tissue. And so right now, you have young Strife just being able to slowly rip apart Nathan. But every single piece of pain that Cable is feeling, so is young Strife as well. Now, luckily for young Nathan, that mysterious voice in his head once again helps him out to get out of this situation. And so you have young Nathan being able to release a powerful psychic blast to send young Strife away, to knock him out, but to also save his life. After all of that, we do learn that thanks to Cable and also the voice in his head, he was able to begin the process of self-destructing the entire building. Now, you have everybody being able to escape. But the thing is, now the question is, can Cable or young Nathan officially tap into his psychic abilities? Now, while you have the rebellion and our heroes being able to get away, we jump over to Chivalry, where for Chivalry, he kind of believes that right now, young Strife needs to be stopped. Like, thanks to Apocalypse raising young Strife, he's now going to reach his full potential of being this chaos bringer. If he becomes this chaos bringer, it'll be the end for everything across the world, everything that Apocalypse have built up. And so for Chivalry, his main goal is to prevent Strife to becoming this chaos bringer. Now, as we get into the final chapter of the storyline, 3 more years has passed by. So now 12 years total that Cyclops and Jean Grey have been in the future with young Cable. But now he's going through puberty. And this is a major problem. And the reason why, because the techno-organic virus in his body was in remission all these years. But suddenly, it has flared up. Now, we're kind of left to believe that because he's going through puberty, that is why it had flared up. So right now, for a young Cable, it does look like he is going to die. Now, we already know there's no way he's going to die, but for the sake of the storyline, it's like, oh my God, can he survive the techno-organic virus going through his body at the moment? But while that is going on for young Cable, for young Strife, you have Apocalypse saying, okay, it's almost time. It's almost time for me to go ahead and possess the body of young Strife here and use his body as a way to continue my control over this world. And so right now, you actually have Chivalry wondering what to do to stop this from happening. But the problem is, it does seem like there's no way to stop this from happening. Sooner or later, Strife is going to be controlled by Apocalypse. Now, here's the thing. You have Apocalypse explain why he named the child Strife. Because his past self had met an enemy known as Strife. back in the Executioner Song storyline. But he had no idea the name Strife or the opponent that he fought would be the same one that he would raise in the far future. He had no way of knowing. Either way, for young Apocalypse, it's now time for him to go ahead and take over the body of Strife. Now, as we jump back over to Cable, we kind of go inside his mind, where he's then confronted by, well, I say the spirit of Rachel Summers. Now, we see Rachel as she was when she first appeared in Marvel Comics all those years ago in the Days of Future Past timeline. But it's her saying like, hey, I came here to you to tell you something very important, Cable, and that would be you will never have a home. And that is very important when it comes to the character of Cable, because Rachel Summers met his future version of himself in the past, and they fought alongside one another in different types of situations. But before we are able to learn more about that, we jump over to Slim and also Red, Cyclops and Jean Grey. I don't know why I call them their fake names. But either way, for Jean Grey, it's her telling Cyclops that she has to go. It's time for the final raid against Apocalypse Citadel to hopefully bring him down, but to also stop that virus from being released in this time period. And so for Cyclops, he'll stay behind because he cannot afford the idea of losing his son once again. He cannot afford the idea of leaving his son's side when his son needs his help once again. And so to say goodbye, as you have Jean Grey go ahead with the raid people. But I want to jump back over to Rachel Summers and also Cable in the mind of young Cable, because this is the moment where we do learn that yes, Cable is really powerful, just as powerful as Strife as we saw him back in the Executioner Song. But the reason why we are not really able to see Cable reach that full potential is all because of the techno-organic virus. It's Rachel saying like, listen, you are probably the most powerful psychic out there in the world. You have the ability to do so many great things, but unfortunately, you must have to use all your power to hold back the techno-organic virus. Because if you were able to do that, then you were able to continue to live your life. But once you do that, you have to realize that your life will be completely different from now on. And so it's her teaching him and showing him, just like Jean Grey did earlier, how to use his powers in the right way to push back that techno-organic virus to make sure it does not kill him at all. And so when we go back into the main world, the main reality, we see him waking up and being able to push that virus away from being able to swallow him up whole. And now he's able to hug his father. But getting back over to Jean Grey, she does arrive just in time where you have Apocalypse trying to transfer his essence into the body of young Strife. But unfortunately, it doesn't work out. And here's the reason why. Because Strife is a clone. And with him being a clone, he is no longer able to absorb the essence of Apocalypse. His body will not be able to take on the powerful essence of Apocalypse and become the perfect host for him. And so, unfortunately, all this hard work Apocalypse did was for nothing. Now, guys, it's kind of funny to me because you have Apocalypse say like, I outlived Charles Xavier, Magneto, Sinister, Holocaust. Now that character right there, we have not talked about him just yet, but it's him saying like, I outlived all of you guys. And matter of fact, the Ascani, the Rebellion, every single person who tried to stop me had failed. To only have him fail by this point in the story. So now you had a story kind of wrap up very quickly here, because you do have Apocalypse be killed off by the powers of Cyclops, Jean Grey, and also young Nathan. With the combination of their powers, they were able to go ahead and get rid of Apocalypse, but also because the body he was in currently was already burning out. It was no longer able to withstand the essence of Apocalypse, but also now the powers of our heroes hitting that body all at once. Now, for our heroes, it kind of seemed like, okay, everything is over now. Apocalypse is gone. But with him being gone, it's now Rachel Summers saying, your job is done now. Like, I brought y'all here to help raise Cable up to a point where he'll now be ready to be the hero of this time. And now, technically, he is ready. And so now with that being said, it's now time for us to go ahead and send you guys back home to your time. And for Cyclops, he hates the idea of once again leaving his son, but unfortunately, he has to. And so just like that, they go back in time. Now, for Chauvery, he does tell Cable this right here. Like, hey, listen, you may have got rid of Apocalypse, but he had many followers. Those followers, sooner or later, will come after you. Those followers will pick up where he left off at. And so this leads into the other books we already covered when it comes to the origin of Cable in the future where he comes from. But with all that being said, guys, this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, I'll see you in the next comic book video.